And we're back for a third hour of American Agenda. I'm Heather Childers.
And I'm Bob Sellers. We are joined today by a family of co-hosts, Republican strategist and attorney Amanda Makki, and attorney and GOP strategist Amir Benno, and the CEO of Fair Rock Strategies, Christina Antello. So we just spoke with Steve Hecht, who has written a column called "Georgia is the Only Path to the Constitution's Survival." Hecht says individual liberties are threatened if the Georgia Senate race goes to the Democrats and flips the balance of power. One of the candidates, John Ossoff, has said that he is in favor of adding more judges to the Supreme Court, stacking the court in the Democrats' favor. Is Georgia that critical? So, Amanda, I'll start with you. How important is Georgia? I'm so sorry to say this. We're having an audio problem with you. So.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Go ahead.
It couldn't be more important because the stakes are so high. Should President Trump be not able to prevail in the lawsuits and in the Electoral College through the joint session on January 6th, you really are leaving the entire government to one party. And I think that the Georgians are going to want a check and balance on their government. They're independently minded. And Ossoff and Warnock are certainly not in the ilk of a Jimmy Carter, a peanut farmer who's a small business owner. These are radicals in the ilk of AOC and Rashida Tlaib, to the left of Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, and I love anybody that uses the word ilk. So let's go to Christina. Christina, is this an overstatement?
Yes, absolutely. It's a vast overstatement, to say the least. They are not radicals. They are not to the left of Bernie Sanders. That is absurd. They are Democrats. So, yes, they do believe in probably a more progressive stance than what she might be used to. But certainly they are pragmatic, and they are business-friendly Democrats that are willing to get to work here in D.C. And looking for that opportunity. But above that, I think also kind of just even stating, there have been many times in our history, our constitutional, democratically elected history, where there has been one-party control in both houses of Congress and the White House, and we have survived just fine. And so to say that there are, yes, I admit, there are some radical liberals on our side. There's about 5 of them, but you need 218 in the House to pass legislation and 60 in the Senate to get things done, and that's just not enough on the numbers to change anything too radically. So we will survive one-party rule should it happen.
Yeah, Amir, I personally think saying we lose the Constitution, I went to college and learned all about it as a government major at the University of Virginia, and I believe wholly in it, but it is a living document. So people do worry about the people associated with it, whether it be followed. And it is true, though, isn't it, Amir, you're our lawyer here, that you can change the size of the Supreme Court?
Well, to the extent that what you're saying, Bob, that it's not in the Constitution, the size of the Supreme Court, you're 100% correct. The Supreme Court has had 9 justices since the Reconstruction era after the Civil War. And there is something to that number, and it's not just arbitrarily chosen. Now, yes, it has expanded in years before that, generally as we pushed it west and we expanded the size of our territory as a nation. But we have never, in the history of the United States, decided on the number of Supreme Court justices based on political dogma and doctrine and ideology.
Let me throw something at you. From my reading of history, and maybe I'm wrong because you're the lawyer here, but I thought even Abraham Lincoln was trying to expand the court because he was getting pushback because he was against slavery, and he actually had a pro-slavery Supreme Court, so he wanted to add more justices that would uphold the Union side. Am I wrong on that?
Well, I can't speak to Abraham Lincoln about that. I'm not familiar with whether that was something.
Well, you said in American history that's why. That's the only reason I threw it out.
Well, I'm talking about we've never decided the number of justices on the court, actually placed justices there based on your political ideology, saying, look, we don't like how the 9 justices on the currently constituted Supreme Court are ruling on any number of issues. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to add more justices who are of a political alignment with the Democrat Party or a political faction of the Democrat Party in order to counterbalance or outweigh or outvote the other justices. That has never been done before. That is what FDR was trying to do in 1936, and that was defeated. But it was defeated in that we couldn't get the popular support. But he won in the sense that all of his New Deal legislation ended up suddenly getting approved by the Supreme Court, which prior to his threat to pack the court had found that legislation unconstitutional. So there is precedent for the Supreme Court being intimidated, which I think is what happened here in the Texas case. It was intimidated, but we've never seen the number of justices on our high court decided by political affiliation.
Yeah, and we all know, Heather, that elections have consequences, as President Obama said at the time, and then President Trump has used that himself when he has tried to undo some of those policies. But a lot of people feel that if the Democrats have control of the Senate as well as the House, that this really could change the direction of the country.
Well, I mean, you can take a look specifically at one of the candidates in Georgia. Since we were talking about Georgia, one of the Senate candidates there, John Ossoff, Democrat, has flat out said on camera that he is for packing the court. So I was going to actually ask Christina about that. I mean, how do you feel about that? Do you think that you should pack the court?
I don't, and I don't think that Joe Biden does either, and I don't think that a majority of the Democrats in the House and the Senate believe that either. And so while it's a fun parlor game to sit around and talk about, and it's something to hypothesize of a potential strategy or what they could do or what they could consider, I don't think there are the votes to get it done, and I'm more worried about what we can actually get done and get passed, and I'd rather spend the first 100 days worrying about how we get back from this coronavirus and get our economy going instead of hypothesizing about things that won't happen.
I like the name parlor game. That's what we should call this show, the parlor game, because that's what we're doing. We're sitting here talking. So Amanda, to wrap it up for us as far as what's going on in Georgia, what do you think the consequences there will be?
I think that both sides are going to do their best to bring forward all the people that they can to make sure that they can vote. I think what the Democrats have said, at least Andrew Yang, who was a former Democrat presidential candidate, has told people to move to Georgia. So there is significant concern with potential fraud that could happen in the state of Georgia. I, in full disclosure, will be going to Georgia as a volunteer for the NRSC, and so we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. But look, there is so much riding on this, and control of the Senate potentially rests with the tie-breaking vote, Kamala Harris, who is the most progressive senator in the United States Senate. And so there's a lot riding on this. I mean, if people are worried about defunding the police, which is happening all across the country, Medicare for all, packing the courts, as we've been talking about, which is something that has been widely discussed among Democrats, and they don't like to say that they would support it. They dodge on it, but certainly that's something that they're looking at. D.C. statehood, and all those parade of horribles that we've been hearing about over and over in the past year, those become very real things that can happen should the Democrats control the House, the Senate, and the White House.
All right, thank you very much. And we will be back with more of American Agenda. We've got a lot more to talk about on the parlor game.
Wrap is presented by